I have to admit, I did become a little bit jaded as we ran through 2017, feeling that somehow cars were definitely becoming less and less fun. As we marched towards the all-electric future, there was a sensation of less feel from steering, less response from throttle, and just a diminution of the sheer fun that should be part and parcel of driving almost any car. And then, right at the end, just before we broke for Christmas, I got the chance to drive this, the Porsche Boxster GTS. Now, theoretically, this really shouldn't be any great improvement on the standard Boxster or on the Boxster S. It uses the same 2.5 litre turbocharged flat 4 engine as you get in the Boxster S, and it only has an extra 15 horsepower and only a few extra of Newton meters of torque. There's no major tweaks to the chassis, it's just that you get the Porsche active suspension as standard, you get bigger 20-inch alloy wheels, and you get chunkier brakes, and you can have the optional ceramic brakes and all that sort of stuff, and you do get a rather lovely interior, which is, again, basically that of the standard Boxster, but with this lovely suede rim steering wheel and a few suede bits. It's actually Alcantara, fake man-made suede. It's great stuff, though. Swathed around the cabin. So, I wasn't really expecting an awful lot from it. I mean, I like the Boxster a lot. The standard car's lovely. The standard 2-litre version is particularly lovely. And yet, this GTS, right at the end of 2017, turns out to be the best car I drove in all of 2017. Not the best car overall, not the best family car, certainly, but the best to drive, the most fun, the most engaging, the one that I just couldn't tear myself away from the steering wheel of. You might be able to hear in the background, it's absolutely lashing rain at the moment here in Andalusia in southern Spain. We're just near Malaga. It has been belting down with rain for the last couple of days here, and the roads are like an ice rink thanks to the combination of standing water and that fine layer of dust that comes as standard on almost all southern Spanish roads. It is incredibly treacherous out here, so you would think that deploying 365 horsepower through the rear wheels from a hyperactive turbocharged engine would be a bit of a nightmare, but actually it's just the best fun. This car is so good. It's so alive under you, in your palms, under the soles of your feet. It just rewards every input that you give with an equal and opposite reaction. It just absolutely loves to drive and be driven, this car. The steering is bursting with feel. It's an electrically assisted steering rack. Porsche, much as they were with hydraulic power steering back in the 1980s and early 1990s, among the first companies to make a truly reactive, responsive and talkative electric power steering system. This car is one that tells you exactly what's happening at each corner, under each contact patch, and that's why even in slippery, slidey, slimy conditions like these, it's not intimidating, it's not worrying, it's not scary. Every time a wheel breaks traction, every time the car starts to twitch and slide and move away from your chosen line, you know you can just give it a corrective lock of steering, you can just give it a little tweak to the throttle, a down change on the gear shift if you fancy, and it'll come back to where you want it. It'll work with you, not against you. It is phenomenally good to drive. It's also, as is typical of a Porsche, phenomenally well built. This cabin, it's not the most attractive cabin in a visual sense, but it actually is beautifully made, very comfortable, spacious for two people, even if you're quite tall, and just the quality is off the scale good. Now, the flaw in this car, if it is such, is in the engine. It's very hard to describe an engine that produces 365 horsepower from 2.5 litres as anything other than impressive, and in a technical sense it is a hugely impressive engine. The problem is one of noise quality. Now, this has been much talked about with this new 718 Boxster and Cayman engine, because it doesn't sound as musical as the old 6-cylinder units. Porsche has gone for efficiency and low CO2 instead of music for this engine, and unfortunately that does wear on you a bit. It's not an unpleasant sound as such, it's gruff, sounds a bit like an old Subaru Impreza Turbo in fact, but it just doesn't have that lovely sonorous quality of the old flat 6 engine. If you can live without that, and I think for the most part I can, just occasionally you do get the pang for the old sound though, then it's a perfectly good engine, indeed even quite a brilliant one in some respects. It does have quite high CO2 figures in this GTS model, over 200 grams per kilometre, which certainly puts the impressive 160 gram per kilometre performance of the standard car into quite sharp relief. But such considerations really are not what would bring you towards a GTS anyway. I don't think anybody is going to buy or not buy this car on the basis of its CO2 emissions or its tax bill, or even for the most part for its exhaust note. What they will buy it for is the fact that on tricky roads like these, with steering like this, with a chassis like this, with engine responsiveness like this is one of the very best cars to drive of any kind, in any country, at any price point. There are very few cars I can think of that are any more fun to drive than this, and even fewer that are as good fun. It's just really brilliant. It's a car that reminds you, most importantly, why we all love driving in the first place.